On behalf of our entire council, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm proud to welcome you to the Navy League Seattle's annual Navy Marine Corps Night, one of the mainstays of our annual calendar. As you may know, Navy League of the United States was founded in 1902 with the encouragement of President Theodore Roosevelt, with a specific charter to advocate for and support the sea services. It is in that spirit that we are here today. We're glad you can join us tonight, and if you prefer to watch the proceedings on a bigger screen, you can search for Navy League Seattle in YouTube on your TV and watch the live broadcast there. Although you can't all see each other, we're happy to welcome members and guests to the meeting tonight. We're going to open tonight's program with the national anthem. Normally we would have that played in the room, but we're going to have it recorded from a previous presentation by our Blue Angels Squadron Sea Cadets. All right, thank you, Sea Cadets. And now we call the meeting to order in the traditional manner of the Seattle Council by ringing the bell presented to us by former Council Presidents Tom and Diane Jaffa. Past President Jeff Davis will do the honors for us. All right, thanks, Jeff. Our agenda tonight begins with a short update on Seattle Council activities and plans, and then shifts to focus on the United States Navy and Marine Corps, with a presentation from Major Cody Hardenburgh, USMC, including a video of the traditional Marine Corps birthday ceremony, and a presentation by Captain Emily Bassett, USN, speaking to us about leader development, followed by audience questions and answers. Please use the Zoom chat feature to send in your questions during the presentations, and then we'll pose them to Captain Bassett at the end. First, an update on Seattle Council activities. During the year, it's you can see, well, as soon as we get the screen up here, there we go. These are the things that we've been doing in 2021. All of our meetings have been virtual. The only live event we actually held this year was one of our Fleet Week events, a concert on the pier during the middle of Fleet Week. The pandemic prevented us from meeting in person, but we've kept up a regular schedule of virtual events, including our monthly socials that ran from January through October. As we look forward to 2022, just to give you a heads up, we have two things on the calendar now. The first is our annual meeting, which will take place in either late January or early February. If you go ahead and shift to the next slide there, please, Jeff. And Fleet Week. Fleet Week will take place late July, early August. We anticipate that it's going to be a live Fleet Week. It's going to depend on what happens, of course, in the pandemic between now and then. The Third Fleet is having a meeting with all the Fleet Week planners in January, and we should know more after that. But we are planning for it to be a live Fleet Week with many of our traditional events, as well as a few of the things that we learned during the pandemic about holding virtual events or adding a virtual audience to our events. And we have a number of other things that we're planning for the coming year. Our board of directors is working on it right now. Number of events and engagements, all centered on carrying out our mission in support of the sea services. So we're working on the structure of the year, what kind of events we plan to have, and whether they're live or virtual, and what the calendar is. As soon as we have more on that, we'll let you know. Expect to be able to report more on that to you in our December scuttlebutt. So moving to the headline portion of our program, let us reflect on the 246-year heritage of our Navy and Marine Corps. Since 1775, they have guarded our shores, protected our commerce, patrolled distant waters, and brought power to bear on distant shores in service to the nation, in peacetime and wartime, and often out of sight of their countrymen. That this service is so vital and yet so often unrecognized by many Americans because it takes place far away and out of sight is why it is the Navy League mission to honor their service and to advocate for maintaining strong and capable naval services. Which brings us to our first presentation for the evening. Major Cody Hardenburgh serves as the commanding officer of Recruiting Station Seattle, responsible for all enlisted and officer recruiting in Washington, Idaho, and Montana. A native of Belmore, New York, Major Hardenburgh graduated from Norwich University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and was commissioned in May 2008. In his first 4 years as an infantry officer, he deployed to Afghanistan 3 times with various elements of the 2nd Marines. After a tour training and tracking Marine Corps Embassy security teams, he completed the Expeditionary Warfare School as a distinguished graduate and was assigned to the 3rd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, deploying to Okinawa. Before coming to Seattle, Major Hardenburgh earned his master's degree in military studies at the Marine Corps Command and Staff College. Major Hardenburgh's remarks were pre-recorded for his troops throughout Recruiting Station Seattle and for sharing with us, along with video of the traditional Marine Corps birthday ceremonies, featuring stirring messages from the current Commandant, General Berger, the 13th Commandant, General Lejeune, and the cake cutting ceremony. Welcome, Major Hardenburgh.
Before us tonight stands an empty chair and a single lone table draped in white, signifying all of our fallen comrades who are not with us this evening, because they have given the full measure of devotion to our country and to our beloved Corps. The single lighted candle reminds us of the flame of eternal life, and that the memory of our fallen comrades will be with us always. The Purple Heart Medal is displayed to reflect the shedding of blood and the ebb of life in battle. The identification tags are blank, yet they could bear the name of any of us here tonight. Only a few Americans choose the dangerous and necessary work of fighting our nation's enemies. As a consequence of that choice, some have paid the ultimate price, joining the honor roll of heroes who have built the noble legacy of our Corps. For those of us who carry on that legacy, it is our obligation to honor those fallen Marines. As Marines gather in celebration of our history, we gather in the shadows of greatness. Though our fallen can no longer participate in our traditions, they will always be a part of us and who we are. Ladies and gentlemen, a message from the 38th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General David H. Berger.
When our nation called, Marines were there to defend her.
U.S. officials increasingly worried by the hour.
But our enemies now pose an ever-growing threat to America and our way of life.
Another U.S. Navy warship now in place tonight off the coast. About 250 Marines.
The Marine Corps must be prepared to fight and win. Tonight, Marines around the world proudly celebrate 246 years of defending our great nation. Our warrior lineage and the battles that have been fought and won across generations have become legend. Throughout the centuries, the Marine Corps' relentless pursuit of excellence is unchanged. We are still made from the same grit and steel, with the same moral instincts and the same unending will to fight. Marines remain physically, mentally, and emotionally tough, forged in the crucible to overcome fear and adversity. In these ways, the Corps and the lifelong faith we place in each other is proudly unchanging.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
On the 11th day of September 2001, our country was attacked.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Like the attack on Pearl Harbor 60 years before, that day changed everything.
Our Marines have fought and won in hostile places like Anbar, Sangin, Fallujah, Helmand, Mosul. We earned our reputation as an elite counterinsurgency force, but that remains only a part of who we are.
After 5 days of heavy fighting, Marines raised our beloved American flag on top of Mount Zerbat.
What Marines are, what Marines have always been, is amphibious warfighters. And the changing battle now requires us to return to our origins, relying on foundations built by the Marines that came before us. The Marine Corps' identity remains the same. Our infantry battalions will remain at the center of what we do, and the Marine and their rifle will continue to be one of the deadliest weapons on the battlefield. But being ready now requires us to return to the seas and shores of maritime terrain.
The history of the Marine Corps is marked by a series of paradigm shifts, and this is one of them. The hard-won lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan and the blood Marines have shed there will not soon be forgotten. We're using the lessons of our past combined with the weapons of the future to reimagine our warfighting capabilities through continuous adaptation and experimentation.
Marines around the globe, Marines like you, are a vital part of this effort. Your ideas, your feedback will be key to moving the Marine Corps into the future and ensure that we will continue our legacy of winning battles.
And to the Marines who have served our nation and returned home to continue to fight and win battles of a different kind in their own communities, we thank you.
As Marine brothers and sisters, Semper Fidelis is a pledge that we promise to live by. The work of our Marine veterans is a living testament to the faith Marines keep with each other, with our Corps, and with our country. The next generation of Marines may operate differently and in different places than the Marines who wear the Eagle Globe and Anchor today. But they will join a long and proud heritage of Marine fighters who have never turned from a threat, never turned from an enemy. We will always remain most ready when our nation is least ready, because we must protect our shores and we must protect our citizens. It's still going to be the Marines who defend this nation.
Semper Fidelis, and happy birthday, Marines.
Since that day, Marines have continued to distinguish themselves on many battlefields and foreign shores, in war and peace. On this birthday of the Corps, therefore, in compliance with the will of the 13th Commandant, Article 38, United States Marine Corps Manual, edition of 1921, is republished as follows.
On November 10th, 1775, a Corps of Marines was created by a resolution of the Continental Congress. Since that date, many thousand men have borne the name Marine. In memory of them, it is fitting that we who are Marines should commemorate the birthday of our Corps by calling to mind the glories of its long and illustrious history. The record of our Corps is one which will bear comparison with that of the most famous military organizations in the world's history. During 90 of the 146 years of its existence, the Marine Corps has been in action against the nation's foes. From the Battle of Trenton to the Argonne, Marines have won foremost honors in war, and in the long eras of tranquility at home, generation after generation of Marines have grown gray in war in both hemispheres and in every corner of the 7 seas that our country and its citizens might enjoy peace and security. In every battle and skirmish, since the birth of our Corps, Marines have acquitted themselves with the greatest distinction, winning new honors on each occasion until the term Marine has come to signify all that is highest in military efficiency and soldierly virtue. The high name of distinction and soldierly repute we who are Marines today have received from those who preceded us in the Corps. With it, we have also received from the eternal spirit which has animated our Corps from generation to generation, has been the distinguishing mark of the Marines in every age. So long as the spirit continues to flourish, Marines will be found equal to every emergency in the future as they have been in the past, and the men of our nation will regard us as worthy successors to the long line of illustrious men who have served as soldiers of the sea since the founding of our Corps.
The inspiring message of our 13th Commandant has left its mark in the hearts and minds of all Marines. Ladies and gentlemen, it is customary at Marine Corps birthday celebrations worldwide for Marines to cut a traditional cake in celebration of the birth of our illustrious Corps. A sword is used to cut the cake as a reminder that we are first and foremost a band of warriors, committed to carrying the sword so that our nation may live in peace. On November 1st, 1921, John A. Lejeune, 13th Commandant of the Marine Corps, the first piece is given to the oldest and youngest Marines within the command, symbolizing the experience and the youthful spirit that are hallmarks of our Corps. The oldest Marine present is Sergeant Major retired Damian Cohen. He was born in April of 1978, and he enlisted into the Marine Corps in 1996. He retired on September 30th, 2020. The passing of the cake from the oldest to the youngest Marine symbolizes the passing of history and traditions to the next generation. The youngest Marine present is Sergeant Gabriel Borjas. He was born on November 28, 1998. He enlisted into the Marine Corps on October 17, 2016, and is currently the administrative clerk at Marine Corps Recruiting Station, Seattle. Ladies and gentlemen, the commanding officer of Recruiting Station, Seattle, Major Cody Hardenburgh.
On this day, although we can't be together, the significance has no less meaning to us. Across our 46 federal installations in 3 different states and 220,000 miles, it makes no difference to us whether we are together or apart. The meaning is the same. We have a significant history in which we are to be proud of. We have excellent people throughout our AOs doing fantastic work. And when you start to think about who are the 2 biggest influencers, in my mind, 2 people come to mind. It's that recruiter that meets that individual on the streets, and it's that drill instructor that meets him on the yellow footprints. You are the first impression and lasting impression of the Marine Corps in the forward-facing uniform to the community. It is my distinct privilege and honor to be your commanding officer, and I know that we are there in spirit with you as we go through these trying times. Hopefully next year we could celebrate in person, but again, the significance has no less meaning to us. Whether you're in a 2-man fighting position, a 1-man PCS, or 1-woman PCS, significance has no difference to us. Sergeant Major.
Happy birthday, Marines. Semper Fi.
Thank you, Major Hardenburgh and the Marines of Recruiting Station Seattle. Next, we welcome Captain Emily Bassett, United States Navy, who serves as the Force Nuclear Propulsion Officer for COMNAVAIRFOR's Bremerton Detachment at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, where she oversees all things nuclear for the carrier force. A native of Edmonds, Washington, Captain Bassett was commissioned via the Naval ROTC program at Boston University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in classical civilizations. Afloat, she completed division officer tours aboard USS Rushmore and USS Abraham Lincoln, and department heads tours in USS Ingraham and back at USS Abraham Lincoln. She served as executive officer in USS Arlington, taking the ship into her maiden deployment. And she was the first commanding officer of LCS Crew 214 and commissioned littoral combat ship USS Manchester, LCS 14, and later served as reactor officer in USS Gerald Ford, the first in a new class of aircraft carriers. Ashore, Captain Bassett was selected for an Olmsted Scholarship and earned a master's degree in Hispanic Studies, taught in Spanish from the University of Cadiz in Spain. She also served as the COMNAV Airland Force Reactor Training Assistant and earned a master's degree in Engineering and Management from Old Dominion University. Welcome, Captain Bassett.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Steve, and the Navy League of Seattle area. It's just really great to be here. It's a hard act to follow. It's getting a little teary-eyed and choked up, honestly, to watch that video, to think of all those Marines out there. And so thank you for sharing that video, and thank you for all those listeners that got to watch that today and in celebration of Veterans Day. Really fitting. So thank you for letting me be part of your program. I was inspired by a book I read long ago, actually, by Sebastian Junger. And the name of the book is called Tribe, and it's a book about belonging. And one thing that he said in that book that really stuck with me is he was remarking on how Americans celebrate Veterans Day. And in it, he said, we often, as citizens who haven't served, find ourselves saying, thank you for your service to those who have served, as a way to celebrate Veterans Day or really throughout the year. And that's great. I think there's obviously a nice connection there. It's nice, really nice to get that response. Certainly compared to our history in Vietnam, we weren't getting that response, those who came back after they fought. So I think that's great. But his contention is that if you really want to create belonging in a community, instead of saying thank you for your service to a service member, that instead you would say, tell me your story. And I thought that was fascinating. And so his idea, he goes into the book, he's like, hey, we should have open mic nights, we should have community gatherings, or where literally you let service members come back and tell their story. So in that vein, I thought, okay, well, first of all, let me thank the Navy League for asking me to tell my story. I did say my remarks would be about leader development. So that's the part of my story that I'm most passionate about. So I will tell that part, and just say thank you for listening to me tell my story tonight, because that's really what Sebastian Junger would tell us creates belonging in a community. So I picked, thank you for telling me my bio, Steve. It's good to see you again. We haven't seen each other in years. Those of you who don't know, he was my commanding officer when I was stashed, as they call it, between duty stations and needed a few months to hang my hat. And so I worked at the Navy ROTC unit, advising midshipmen who were going to go become nuclear engineers. And so it was really great to see you there. And we were just reminiscing because he came to my wedding back in 2005. We just celebrated our 16th wedding anniversary last weekend. And so that was great to see you again. Also, I don't see Admiral Costello on the call here, but he and I chatted beforehand because he might be watching this video later. But another connection, he was kind enough to send me a handwritten note. Actually, he kind of signed it, he sent me a note when I was in command. His cousin was on his cousin David was on the commissioning ceremony for the USS Manchester. And so he knew I was from Seattle. It was just really nice to make that connection. So I was looking forward to seeing him tonight and being in touch again. So thank you, Admiral Costello. So my story, in 20 minutes, or I think that's kind of my allotted time, I kind of picked three threads that I would share with you. one story is going to be the story of what I call my napkin. Another story is going to be the story of what I call the wand. And then my last story, not quite as catchy, but it takes up a lot of my life. So it's my current story, and it's the story of webinars. So we'll tell you about Lean On Navy webinars. That's my third thread I'll share with you, and they're all about leader development. So my first story of my napkin, true story. So when I was a lieutenant, and I was on one of my first dates with now my husband, excuse me, Will. He was a lieutenant as well. I was a surface warfare officer, nuclear engineer on the Abraham Lincoln, as Steve introduced me, having done. And this man I was dating was a lieutenant as well, an aviator. He was a P3 pilot. And within a couple of our first dates, I pretty much had to know whether this was going to work out between the two of us, right? So I get out a napkin, and we were at Starbucks, and he's a left-handed, so he had a Sharpie pen. And I was like, okay, so I don't know about you aviators. I know us SWOs, surface warfare officers, we kind of have a plan for how this career works. So I drew on a napkin blocks of what the next 20 years would look like, right? Or at least 15, because I'd been in the Navy for about 5 years at that point. And I was like, and here's where I'll do this, and then I'll go do that, and then I'll be on the ship, and then this is really the only time I'm going to be able to get married in this little period here. And then I want to have 2 kids. So this is kind of when I'd have those kids, and I don't, want 2 of them. And this is when I want to live abroad. I want to be an Olmsted scholar. So do you aviators, do they let you go abroad? Okay, good, because I want to go abroad. And then I come back, be the XO of a ship, CO, and then the reactor officer, aircraft carrier. That would be about here. And then I want to come back to live here in Seattle. We met in Seattle. He was not from Seattle, but he was stationed here. Like, then I want to retire here. All my family and friends are from here. And the kids will be, let's see, they will be 8 and 10. So that was like our first week of dating. And he always jokes that he fit the bill because, fast forward, here we are living in Seattle. Our kids were 9 and 11, so we were 1 year off. We spent 3 years living in Spain, where I did get selected as an Olmsted scholar. I did have command. And really, it's, Will has been with the program that whole time. And I absolutely am living my fairy tale right now. Like, I am supremely happy living in my hometown of Seattle. I get to ride my bicycle to the ferry, take the ferry to Bremerton, where I, as Steve briefed, I'm the Force Nuclear Propulsion Officer, get to use all my experience having had command, all my experience having been a reactor officer to help those reactor departments on those 2 aircraft carriers over there. And I love it. I love it. Kids are healthy. I'm on the parish council, at church. I'm, very actively involved in my community, and I'm 2 blocks from my high school. So anyway, I'm supremely happy, and that's sort of my story of my napkin, and that Will went with the plan. So the second story I'll share is a story of a wand, and the image of a wand. I'd like you to think of Mickey Mouse, I think it is, in Fantasia, who has a wand that is like orchestrating this chaos around him that is this Disney chaos and color and diversity, and pretty much describes exactly how I felt when I was the reactor officer on Gerald R. Ford. And I have the image behind me of a $13 billion aircraft carrier, knew everything. So new electrical distribution system, new assumptions. We had 1/3 the sailors to do the same job that we had done. So that it saves manpower, but it certainly required us to be a lot smarter, interact in more complexities. We were the first in class, so a lot of our knowledge was new, and the challenges were immense and fascinating. And I had that same joy that I think that Mickey Mouse might have had with all that color and creativity, but yet the constraints and the demands of that come with the technical portion of the job. So it wasn't my first reaction to consider myself a conductor. My first reaction was to hunker down and get smart and figure this out, but that was not sustainable. So I told you this was going to be a leader development presentation. So the story of the wand and how I got to that image and how it helped me get through that incredibly complex tour with great joy by the end is really a story of leader development from the big Navy's perspective and how it applied to me personally. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and share with you something many of you might know as, well, this audience might not know it, but it's a document that the Navy published called Navy Leader Development Framework. And not meant for you to have to read this whole thing here, but if you were to Google, I'll go up to the top. If you were to Google NLDF 3.0, this document would come up. So Navy Leader Development Framework 3.0. And I'll scroll back to where I just had you a little minute ago, was this is really what saved my life. It was really my leader development, was this portion right here that we in the Navy, the Chief of Naval Operations publishes a document that says, hey, we're going to focus on competence, on character, and on connections. And the story behind this, that is my wand story, comes in the title. So the title was NLDF, originally it was called 2.0. And I was in command of Manchester. So I had 70 sailors, very small crew. And it was a brand new littoral combat ship, as briefed, right? So I was the commissioning commanding officer. We had minemen on board who I'd never served with minemen before. We still hadn't even gotten our mine warfare area certified when I took command. And we had to launch and recover helicopters. We had to do all of our certification areas, first time everything. And there was a lot of complexities there. So NLDF, Navy Leader Development Framework 2.0 had just come out, and it focused on developing character, and it focused on developing competence. And every CO, we like to have our own command, what they call it, CO's philosophy. We love having CO's philosophies. You go into almost any ship, it doesn't take you long before you're going to see a one-pager stuck up on a bulkhead somewhere, and it's going to be the CO's philosophy. And not required, but a lot of us do it. So, my first time in command, here I am wearing my littoral combat ship shirt, very proud of that tour, but I'm like, how do I get people to start a team? How do you do that? So I was super inspired by this NLDF document, and it told me to focus on developing competence and developing character. And it didn't just tell me that I should have it. It told me that I was responsible for developing subordinates character and developing subordinates and peers competence. And I added a third C to it. I thought that's a good start, but I got to have connections as well. So my command philosophy was D2C3, deliberately developing character, competence, and connections. And that was, if you put it in, just that acronym. And of course, they made fun of me. Of course, I had little R2D2s that would show up on my desk, and they would call it my D2C3. But what I would do is I would give command captain's coins once a week at the end of the week for anybody who had gone out of their way and developed integrity or developed something they hadn't, was beyond their competence, took on a watch that wasn't theirs, or maybe they made a mistake and they wanted everyone to know about their tag out violation when they probably could have gotten away with it if we had cleared those tags, never found out. But no, they wanted everyone to know about that. And so we could learn from a mistake. So when that sort of type of event happened, I would have an all hands call and I'd give a coin for developing their character because someone had the integrity to tell us they made a mistake. And so over time, if someone had managed, very hard to do, but if they had managed to get a coin in all three areas, I give them an award, a Navy Achievement Award, which helped them get advancement points, right? So very fun for me, exciting, because I was getting to focus on their learning. I was getting to focus on their developing. I was getting to focus on their connections, which built a team on a new ship. And then translate that to an aircraft carrier where now I have over 200 people, close to 300, and we're operating a $13 billion warship and it's nuclear engineers. That same mindset applied. And I'll get to the wand here in a moment. So how did all that, what does that have to do with a wand, right? okay, so here's what happened. And, you're asking me to tell my story. So for Veterans Day, I'm telling you my story. And this is what happened is that when the Chief of Naval Operations named it 2.0, this was Admiral Richardson at the time, it was to me like an invitation. I thought he's iterating. He's calling it 2.0 because he knows there could be another one ahead of it. So when I went to Naval Reactors there in Washington, D.C., he also, as a CNO, has quarters there, looked him up and said, hey, sir, I want to give you some feedback on your NLDF 2.0. And he met with me and I said, hey, sir, the two parts you have are great, but you're missing a third C. You need connection. And here's why. And I got to tell him the story of what it was like on USS Manchester and how we had focused on connection, in addition to character and competence. And so he said, you know what, you're right. And he let me, as a commander, one commander in charge of 70 sailors on one ship, talking to the Chief of Naval Operations, 4-star Admiral in charge of the entire Navy. He let me change that document and add a third C. So now, still today, and that was 2018. So it was actually over 2 years ago. It was maybe the beginning of 18. So over 2 years ago, I wrote up that change and he published it. So how does that become a wand? Well, the way that becomes a wand is then now he becomes a mentor of mine as I'm working through helping him with the NLDF 3.0. And it was his image that helped me think through how to orchestrate this complex job I was about to have and use it out to sea. And just super proud of that story. It's a little piece of that I got to contribute to the Navy was just to add the third C of connection to that document that still today guides how we develop sailors in the Navy. And since then, one of the huge joys in my life right now is, as many of you find when you retire, that you're asked to go speak like I am right here. That's part of our story that we get to speak afterwards. And so lately, Admiral Richardson and I, he's retired, but he and I have been able to tell that story to audiences at Navy ROTC units and a few other places, so that we're getting an opportunity to sort of tell that story about how to develop character and competence and connections. And that just feels super soulful, very joyful to me that I can take some lessons that I've learned. And this presentation is not that one. So I'm just telling you how the story came to be. So a wand. And the third story I will share, I was not tracking my time, so I hope I'm still within. Steve, give me a thumbs up. Am I good? Okay. So my third and last story that I have for you is, I said webinar, but really where I'm at right now, it's a lean on Navy. That's what I call it. So this story begins when I was lieutenant commander, and I came back from Spain. So I'd been an Olmsted Scholar. I had done 2 department head tours, and I was about to go be the XO of an amphibious warship, right, of USS Arlington. And it was at that point in my life that I realized for the first time that, and I know this sounds crazy, but I realized I was a woman in uniform. And I don't mean, I'm actually not exaggerating. Like, I literally had gotten through my career, you do what you do, you just show up, you get your job done. You just don't think about the fact that you might be a different gender. I didn't, certainly. I was just surrounded by men, but getting the job done. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, they're going to see a female XO. There's not very many female XOs. That's just not really a thing. And they're going to ask me questions like about women in the military. And I probably should have an answer, but all my friends are men. So I don't know if my experience is like other women or if I'm an anomaly. I still actually don't know. No, I do know. So I, out of sheer necessity, had to meet other women and find women that certainly were not by my side. When you're out to sea, when you're on a ship, you're usually the only woman. It's hard to find others unless you reach out that network. So at that time, the book Lean In had just come out by Sheryl Sandberg. I was thirsty for it, and she was the answer to some questions I was having. So I just dug in, and it absolutely helped me. So I found a female mentor who at the time was a captain, and she was the commanding officer of the Navy station in San Diego. I'm sorry, this was in Norfolk. At the time, Captain Mary Jackson, now retired 3-star Admiral Mary Jackson, and we still continue our friendship to this day. She agreed to be my mentor, and I said, I want to host lean-in circles at your home, my home, whoever's home will do it, and like just meet other women. You probably know some. And so for once a month, and this started back in 2012. So for once a month, I have been, and almost without exception, since 2012, I've been gathering usually a group of anywhere about 10 to 12. It started with just women, based on these lean-in circles, and just sort of meet other XOs and COs. And what I found was how similar everyone's story really is, how much we have in common. And so that when I was fighting challenges, I never really ever felt like I was alone. So what I'll share with you now is how it's become a webinar because of COVID, right? And then over time, I did learn how to integrate men, because really the conversation is not a gender specific conversation. It's a conversation that men and women need to have together, right? So what I'll share with you right now is kind of where I'm at with that sort of endeavor of sharing stories through lean-in circles. And now here's this website. So if you were to go now to Lean On Navy, one of my not members, it's one of my participants would say, hey, you need a website. I've been going to your Zoom calls once a month and I want a website. So she designed this for me. So Victoria Reeve, one of my participants, designed this website for me. It's all free. It's just what I've been doing as a hobby. And if you come over to most recent events, you'll see that what I've done in the past month. So a couple weeks ago, I interviewed I had an admiral and a commander and a master chief, and I had them tell their story. This is a podcast where I was invited to speak. There shared. Admiral Richardson was my guest a few months ago, and he talked about how to moderate an authentic conversation. Captain Wolfson, who is the commanding officer of the naval, was commanding officer of the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, and now in Norfolk, told her story. You can see I had CNO Admiral Gilday and his wife talk to us. So this is my sort of passion right now, is getting women to share their story and for men and women to hear it. And these are all free. You can just go online and watch them to sort of hear others tell their story. And that's how I spend my free time right now between my volunteer activities, is to continue what Sebastian Junger really inspired me to do all those years ago, when he said that the way to build belonging and connection is to ask another person, what's your story?
Okay, well, thank you. I really enjoyed that, and you actually preempted one of the questions I had for you. When you got to the third part, because I was going to ask you a question about women in the Navy, because obviously there were many fewer women in the Navy when I was active duty, and there still are certainly a small number of XOs and COs. And I was just wondering if you felt you had particular challenges being a woman in the Navy. If it didn't really occur to you that it was a challenge until you were already a senior officer, then I think then our Navy has come a long way. But I'm wondering, how far have we come?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you that sometimes when you look back as a senior officer and you look back at stories that you thought were normal, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't normal. That would be called sexual assault today, right? Yeah. Or that would have been called sexual harassment today, but we weren't talking about it back then, right? We were just doing our job, right? So I would tell you we still have a long way to go, and we still have a lot to talk about. And similar to what our country is experiencing right now with the DEI space, the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, that is similar on ships, and even more of a challenge because you have so much less privacy on a ship at sea, or really in a squadron or in the military. But I'll just speak from my experience. On a ship at sea, you get a lot less privacy, and you have a lot less say than you do in the civilian world about your boss. So in the civilian world, when your boss behaves a certain way, you can, you can get a new job, or you can, I don't know, I'm not a civilian, but I know in the military, you have to wait for orders, and it's a lot harder. So to answer your question, have we come a long way? In some ways, yes. And in some ways, we still have a long way to go.
How about compared to civil society? Is the military leading, or is the military behind?
I mean, so I'm not your person to ask that question, because I'm in active duty, right? So I'm still active duty. So my lens is active duty, right? So I would not be your person to kind of compare it to civil society, except for to say that what I'm reading about seems to match. I think in some ways we're leading the front. In some ways we have advantages. Pay, for example, I don't have to negotiate my pay based on anything. So I think where the civilian factor might see a pay difference, I might have to look at are we getting promoted differently? That's what I have to look, because my pay is so directly related to my promotion. So we lead the way there. We have a lot of male-dominated sections of the military. So, I was pretty much always one of in wherever I was, like the first or the only on my ship or my squadron. So I was always in an environment where I was one of. So we're just many male-dominated fields. So it's hard to make a comparison. But in some ways, I think we do lead the way. And in some ways, we have bigger challenges than you're going to see in a civilian factor because of the environment.
Okay, thanks. So other members of the audience, if you have questions, toss them into the chat and I'll pose them. I have one more for Emily before I go to the other questions that have come in. So my first ship was Enterprise. CVN 65, so considerably more complex and manned differently, and much more labor intensive than Gerald R. Ford is, I imagine. But I'm marveling at the idea of how few sailors you have to do the job, because we had way many more than you did for essentially the same job. I don't know, how do you man the watch, Bill? How do you get the maintenance done?
That's right. So, I mean, the Navy is good in that they think about all that. So they align the maintenance to the manning, and they do that well. So in theory, it was by design that I was going to be better off. I was going to be just fine. The challenge I faced was that sometimes in littoral combat ship this happened, and also in Gerald R. Ford this happened, where sometimes the planning assumptions for manning a ship, training a ship, and equipping a ship were on different timelines. So I would have the manning I needed if the ship were deployed, but wait a minute, we got delayed because of this. So now I'm actually not deployed. I'm in a maintenance availability, and I need the manning for a maintenance availability. But 2 years ago, when they made manning decisions, they gave me what I needed for manning, not training. So I instead just focused on growth. I focused on deliberately developing character, competence, and connections. And so that we could get after our problems, know what the problem was, face the challenges. And just, if you have a growth mindset, then you can really overcome those challenges, because you can find out where that assumption is. Like, oh, this maintenance assumed that I had more sailors or I had more time. So, okay, well, let's not just full steam ahead. Let's create more sailors or more time for that maintenance. So you got to question your assumptions in the planning and in the execution of maintenance, because we were a learning organization, because we were thinking about how we develop ourselves and not just hunker down and get the task done. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense to me. And it's one of the things that I appreciated during during my career and since is that seeing the Navy evolve as a learning organization, because when I was commissioned in the nuclear Navy, a learning organization wasn't exactly the mantra. So it was, I think that the service has come a long way. I have a question from Bill Bulis, who says, yes, indeed, aviators get to go overseas. He's the retired aviator. And his question is that beyond Junger's tribe, any recommended reading for teenagers that will be tomorrow's leaders?
Absolutely. So I would start with a book called Write It Down, Make It Happen. And that is the book, and I can put it in chat here, but it's really as easy as it just sounds. Write it down, make it happen. And that if you want to rate, if you're talking about teenagers, since that's your question, I will tell you that if a teenager were to read that story, that teenager might end up with a napkin like mine, that they would be able to, so there's a lot behind that napkin. I tell it as a anecdote, but if you want to know how that napkin came to be and how was I so clear about what I wanted out of life, and how was I able to manifest in my life people who would fit that napkin, like Will Bassett, who married me. How did that happen? Well, it happened with everything that's written about in that book, Write It Down, Make It Happen. And full disclosure, so I'm not going to hide this at all. The author of that book, Henriette Klauser, is my mom.
Oh, I remember that now.
So she raised me on the principles in that book, and it is still in publication today. She wrote many books. Put Your Heart on Paper was another one that I love. Writing on Both Sides of the Brain. She taught us how to separate the writing from the editing in our brain. So I grew up learning how to learn. I grew up learning how to think. I grew up learning about what side of your brain is applied when, and how to quiet one side of your brain if you need to change your task or your thinking or your creativity. So I grew up thinking all that kind of stuff was normal. I also grew up thinking it was normal to have a mom with a PhD. And so I also thought that, and I grew up thinking it was normal for the mom to make all the money in the house, right? Because my dad did not work. So anyway, that is my answer to your question. I'm an avid reader. I read all the time. I'm in a couple book clubs, but I would start and end my conversation of all books with Write It Down, Make It Happen. And the subtitle is Knowing What You Want Out of Life and Getting It. And the fan mail she still gets today are incredible.
Oh, that's great. I remember that then from when you were at a UW with us. Bill Larson asks, compliments you as a gifted leader. Thank you. And asks, how did your path lead to nuclear engineering focus? I mean, because and just by way of comparison, okay, I was a mechanical engineering major, and I ended up being a nuke, and you were a classical civilizations major, and you ended up being a nuke. How did that happen?
It's a great question, and one I'm asked often because it is rare. So I am not your typical bird in this endeavor. Most are electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. My story, I can tell it in many ways. The short version of it is I learned in college how to learn. So I studied Greek and Roman civilization. I learned how learners learned and how they wrote about it, and they were inquisitive and questioning. And I got very curious about the brain and how to think and how to learn. And so then when I ended up in the nuclear power program, I was just curious. I was like, okay, well, and if I don't get this right, I felt like I had to buy. I was like, okay, if I don't get this right, if I fail, the worst thing I'll be is a failed nuclear engineer, which sounds just fine to me. Like, I don't think most people would be too judgy of me if I didn't get that right. So I was okay if I didn't get it right. And I was mostly driven by insatiable curiosity and drive to try to get it right. And, but there's a toll there. I think that the mechanical engineers and electrical engineer classmates of mine, I think it was a little bit heavier on their shoulders because they felt like they had to get it right. And they also came knowing a lot more. So they would fight with the material more, where I was like wide open, like just, I believe button, let me go with this. Right. And they had to unlearn probably some of their higher learning that the Navy wants you to operate, right? So we want you to know all the theory and then to operate. And so we had to not have you be a lab physicist. We want you to operate the plant. So it, in some ways, was easier for me towards the end when I had developed habits and learning skills, but the beginning was very tough. So that's kind of how, and I always thought that today could be my last day. I was like, okay, when I fail, I could fail this test, and then I would go back to doing what I enjoyed, which is being a surface warfare officer. That's the way the program is set up. I didn't want to be a nuclear engineer. My advisor required that I go apply, go down to Washington, DC and get interviewed, because I had the highest grades in the battalion because I was studying classical civilization. So of course I had better GPA. He's like, oh, your GPA is high. We're required to send, 2 people, and this, Payne, when you were the ROTC commanding officer, that you had some requirement to send some people to go be nukes, and we didn't have enough in my battalion at Boston University, and so I was directed to go. And I thought, okay, what do I have to lose? So I studied and practiced, and I did what you do when you're told to go do something. You just do your best. It was harder for me, and I certainly am an outlier, and don't know that I would recommend it for others but I would recommend it. It's just a hard program.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you, Captain Bassett. That's all the questions that have shown up in the chat. But I'll say thank you again for taking the time to join us tonight. And we're glad you're back in Seattle. And I think we've all really enjoyed a personal description of leader development, both doing it as a leader and developing yourself as a leader. I think that's been good for all of us. So thank you very much. And we hope to see you again.
All right. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great.
Take care.
And everyone, that concludes the business of the evening, remembering our history, looking to our history, but also looking towards the future of the Navy and the Marine Corps. And that was some of our future right there for us. We look forward to the time when this would mean a return to conversation around the dinner table. Maybe that'll happen with us next year. But in the meantime, we'll keep the Zoom call open after the program is over for people to have a chance to chat with each other. We also want to thank our sponsors. You can see the slide here. These are the sponsors of Navy League Seattle, and they make our work in support of the sea services possible. A number of these sponsors have been with us for many years, and we thank them for their continuing dedication to our mission of supporting the sea services. I also want to thank the volunteers who planned and presented this evening program, especially Jeff Davis, who you saw at the very beginning there, who handled all the backstage technical details and made sure it ran right. A recording of tonight's meeting will be posted on our website and our social media. And we welcome your feedback on how the meeting has gone and how we can make future meetings better, as well as any opportunities you'd like to help volunteer with. As I say, look for news of coming events and our plans for 2022 in our Scuttlebutt newsletter. Probably the November and December ones will have a bit more information than I had tonight to tell you about what we're planning for next year. So have a good evening, everybody.